Friends, we've got a great show for you today, and you're going to see a couple of podcasts over the next little while from the Selling Well. We actually have discussions and interview leaders, folks who are actually practitioners running sales organizations. Today's guest is Camilo Silva, and he's with the Infotech Research Group. You're going to love this conversation because Camilo's done is over the last 18 months, he's built a BDR team from 0 to 55. 0 to 55. So he's got 6 or 7 managers, and then he's got 55 BDRs. So of course, what we're going to talk about today are some concept about how would you actually, recruit, interview, hire, and onboard successfully that big a team in that short period of time. We talk a little bit about the things they interview for at Infotech Research Group. So he talked about the 3 C's of curiosity, coachability, and competitiveness. I really like that. Camilo also talked a lot about collaborating with the rest of the organization to make sure HR and training and development, sales enablement, revenue operations, they're all aligned in the process. Another super interesting thing about Camilo, you'll find he's got a real growth orientation. He's got an amazing calmness and balance for somebody running an organization that big. Camilo took a 6-month sabbatical before he started this assignment. So after having an enormously successful career in technology sales, and he kept getting promoted, he actually takes a pause in the middle of all that, which, I think is incredible to talk to him about why he did it and what he got from it. So I think you'll enjoy that discussion today. And then now that he's come back, he's got that clarity on why. Just a great conversation with Camilo today, team. I really enjoyed chatting with Camilo. I'm sure you're going to enjoy this podcast. And when you do, please like and subscribe to the Selling Well podcast. And thank you for doing so. Here's Camilo Silva. Hey, Camilo, welcome to the show. It's great to have you here.
Absolutely, Mark. Thank you for having me.
So one of the reasons, as we heard in the intro, I was so excited to chat with you today is there really aren't that many people leading, managing, building massive SDR, BDR teams the same way you are at Infotech Research Group. So we're going to get into a lot of that kind of conversation today, a little bit about recruiting and interviewing, hiring, onboarding, those kinds of good things. But everybody's always interested in the journey of someone like you, Camilo. So first of all, welcome to the show. And would you share a little bit, maybe the short story of your professional journey that got you to this point of being the vice president of business development?
Yes, absolutely. So, I think like 99% of people, I fell into sales.
Yeah.
Graduated university. Hey, what do I want to actually do with this diploma? And, I had a brother-in-law who introduced me and said, hey, you should try out sales. Right. And so, once graduating, I started off as like a sales rep at, Infotech Research Group. I was introduced to it, through a career fair. I did about 4 years in terms of, selling the role. The first year was overwhelming, right? Hey, trying to get my feet on the ground. How do I do prospecting? What's a discovery call? How do I manage my pipeline, et cetera? And, did that for about 4 years. Then in 2020, we got tapped on the shoulder to start leading, a team of AEs. And so managed, got introduced to management as well as remote management very early on.
Right.
Did that for about 2-3 years. And I was, successful, won multiple President's Clubs here at Infotech. And in about late 2022, I decided to take a career break. So actually decided to go back to Colombia. I wanted to take 6 months off, spend it, seeing my family and, spending that quality time with them, and got tapped on the shoulder then to come back to Infotech and start leading our BDR function, which, we were having some challenges in terms of top of funnel and having the right amount of meetings. And we wanted to scale that out. So I've been here for the past, I've been back for the past 15 months. We've grown the BDR function from 0 to 55 BDRs. We've scaled fast. And, we've had success and fun while doing it. So, excited to talk a little bit more about that in detail, but that's a little bit of my professional career until now.
What an amazing journey. By the way, so are we. And you threw it out there like it's just an average stat, but you said we grew from 0 to 55 people on the SDR BDR team and you've only been back for 15 months, that's an absolutely flabbergasting number. There's going to be a lot of people out here having tough times building teams of 5, 10, 15, but to build that many people in that short period of time. But one of the things I think is just amazing about your journey was taking that sabbatical. And of course, they do this in academia. As a professor, you've got to take every X number of years, you've got to take a full year off. And it's just this idea of recharging the batteries and regrouping and enjoying life and getting your perspective. It's just such a smart idea. And some of the best thought leaders in the entrepreneurial space, which I tend to play in as an entrepreneur, are always talking about that importance of recharging and recalibrating, getting away. But just in a nutshell, how did you change in that period of time? Like when you came back into the game after 6 months, was it?
6 months, correct.
6 months. What differences did you notice, and how effective, how important was it for you to take that break?
Yeah, great question. It was, I'm going to share quite a bit here, but first of all, taking the break, that was a very hard decision.
Yes, I bet it was, right? Because you're on a roll. You kept getting promoted.
Yeah, exactly. And, coming from, immigrant parents and, always wanting to be successful and give back to them. My why has always been give back to my parents. And,
fantastic.
Telling them, hey, I'm going to take a step away was difficult in my mind. And so, part of the reason why I took the 6-month break is to just get re-present to my why. My parents, but now, okay, I'm getting a little bit older. What is that next why? What do I get enjoyment of? What do I get fulfillment from? And I read a ton and did a bunch of research. Hey, what are the benefits? What's going on? And the way that I rationalized it is, hey, if I'm working for the next 30 years, 6 months is 1/60th of my professional career. And I'm in this Goldilocks zone where I have this, I'm in a financial position where I can do it. So hell, let's go, let's do it. And so, what did I learn about myself though? It was very interesting because I began in December and I went back to Colombia where I'm from, family and everything was going on, a lot of fun. And then January hit, everybody went back into their routines. And then, okay, now what?
Right.
Right.
You must have been dying of, just so anxious or restless.
Absolutely. I'm used to being on the phone. I'm grinding, like being in office, do X, Y, Z, like go, running at 100 miles an hour. And then I had to basically sit down with my thoughts and say, hey, okay, what do I like to do? Right? Where do I get fulfillment?
Yeah.
How do I want to invest my time now having all the time in the world?
Yes.
And, initially it's like, hey, let's travel, let's go out to the best restaurants. Let's do X, let's do Y. But what I learned about myself and about after 2 months is when fun is always fun, it is not that fun.
Right.
When there is no grind, there's no challenge. If I'm not feeling, challenge, it's the nice dinner doesn't feel as good. It's like there was this thing, I do enjoy working with others. I do enjoy, developing. I do enjoy learning. And, that realization allowed me to come back into the workforce 6 months later with a sense, an energy that I don't know if I would have been able to pick up without it.
By the way, again, it's so wise and sort of insightful and mature to be able to do that. But the constant day-to-day pressure, you're from a big city here, you're working in Toronto in Canada. And so there's a lot of go, chase. Don't miss the 6 months. You might have been in position for another promotion. It's so hard to take that pause, but I think in the long term, it's just so important for all of us. And think when you come back and you've connected to that why, the grind starts to become a lot more enjoyable. It stops becoming a grind. It's like, hey, there is a why. This is why I'm doing this. BDR, SDR work is really one of the more difficult things today in B2B sales. Getting attention and interest and engagement, extremely difficult thing to do. So, if our leaders see it as a grind, the teams start to see it as a grind. If our leader sees it as one of the most strategically important things in B2B sales today, that's how the team starts to see their function much more evolved. So really interesting one. And for those listening, by the way, we love your thoughts and comments on how you recharge and how you go back and find your why. But just this idea, it does connect in a little bit. Camila, we both know each other. We've done some work together. And so you've always come across to me as somebody very, very calm and confident. And so there's sort of a balance and a calmness to your approach in an industry where that's lacking sometimes at a leadership level. And I think that does translate down to the team. You know, a steady hand, calm leadership. People want to follow somebody not somebody who's running around like their head's been chopped off and that they're under, you know, like a chicken with no head and just so much stress. So I think that's really a bit of a guiding light in some ways to your management team that reports into you and then to the SDRs and BDRs. So we switch over to the day-to-day, then we think of, hey, we're going to build, you know, a BDR function for the organization. It's going to be significant in size. Seems like a huge task. You know, all of us today are always looking for talent in this area. You guys had amazing numbers in terms of ramping up 55 people in 15 months. Maybe let's start at the basics. First of all, how did you do it? And maybe some of the things that you look for when you're interviewing or recruiting folks for a BDR role. What are some of the attributes you're looking for in an individual that you might consider for the team?
Absolutely. So, you know, how did we do it? I got to give a big kudos to our talent acquisition team, who became my primary stakeholder when I first came back. And, you know, the importance of ensuring that your TA team is aligned to the traits and to what you are looking for in a new hire. And so, you know, I worked very closely with them. I read a lot of books too, like The Who, was, you know, it taught me about scorecards and, you know, ensuring that we can measure how we are, you know, running these interviews. And I think that allowed us to get a lot of alignment, not just from a TA perspective, but like the first, second round interviews that were not being done by me. I was typically the final round interview. Right. So in terms of what I am looking for, you know, I think my team, they know about the 3 C's. And I think I've added a few C's along the way. But I think and especially when hiring for BDRs, because a lot of time it's their first or second role coming out of school.
Right.
They don't know what they don't know. They're trying out sales for the first time. They fell into sales and, you know, they just don't know what they don't know. And so you're really looking at traits more so than experience. Obviously there's some experience that, you know, could be helpful and relevant. But, you know, when we boil it down and try to simplify it, the 3 C's, number 1 is curiosity.
Oh, great.
Curiosity. That's a word that I try to repeat as much as possible. You know, what questions are they asking? How many questions are they asking? Are they genuinely interested in this role? Because I think the level of questioning is directly correlated with how fast you ramp up as a BDR.
Yeah, fantastic.
So that's the first C. The second one is coachability, right? You know, are you going to take feedback? How do you take feedback and put it into action and deliberately practice it? And the third C is competitiveness. You know, do you love to win? Do you hate to lose? Where, you know, if you're at the bottom of a dashboard, or, you know, how much do you want to win? Right. And, you know, over the course of the year, we've added, you know, consistency and, you know, communication and, you know, just a bunch of words that started with C started to come out. But I think when we look, you know, they're curious, coachable, and competitive, that combination is a early indicator, I think, to a successful BDR and a successful AE as they go through their career trajectory.
I love first of all, I love the simplicity of it. And it seems we've always talked about intelligence, drive, and humility. I like your 4 C's better. It's the same thing, frankly, but the 4 C's easier for everybody in the organization to understand and remember, or the 3 C's, right? You've got these. And by the way, Camila referenced Who, which is just an amazing book on interviewing and people by Randy Street and Jeff Smart. And the fun thing about the Smart family is Jeff Smart's a second generation. His dad, Smart Sr., actually invented the top grading interview like 50 years ago. So the son got into the family business of being an expert in terms of interviewing. And those are great books. We'll have the book, by the way, Who, in the show notes for today. But in they come. So you're going through these interviews, these candidates. You know what you're looking for. How would it work within the organization? And we don't have to get to details so much, Camilo, about anything proprietary at Infotech Research Group and the research and advisory space, by the way. Huge success story team. But just one of the things that's always a challenge is this idea of consensus or having multiple people weigh in on an interview process. Like, how do we get Camilo and the head of HR and maybe somebody else who's involved? How do we get everybody aligned? What any suggestions for the groups listening out here today in terms of making sure that we have some way of managing through the consensus required without delaying things?
Yeah, I think, I love that you shouted out that book. It helped tremendously, right? Like a scorecard and aligning on a scorecard and be collaborative, right? Like not just building it out on an island. It's like, hey, like what have we seen work in the past? What would you like to see? I also want to just give a quick shout out, Sales Development Playbook, Trish Bertuzzi, another beautiful read for anybody starting a new SDR function, as well as the Sales Acceleration Formula by Mark Roberge. Like those were my top 3 reads, right? Coming back into this role. But it's very important to have collaboration with these departments and ensure that, you agree on who is making the final call, right? And the final call will be based on design principles or, the scorecard that we all align to. So, and on my end, it was, with working with my boss as well as the head of TA, like we just came together, early on and aligned on what we were looking for and how we were going to measure it and how the decision was going to be made. And we had the green light from there. So nothing more to add on that front.
That's great. A couple of other fantastic books. And you correct me if I'm wrong. By the way, Sales Development Playbook by Trish Bertuzzi, The Bridge Group. If you're looking for data and insight and research on the SDR BDR function, they're one of the best sources we've found is The Bridge Group. They're really great and just love that book. And Mark Roberge, of course, HubSpot, right? So the sales acceleration formula, but the background with HubSpot also just magnificent. And so, one of the things that I was so excited about in terms of just chatting with you today was I've met these people. I met the first 30 anyway, more or less of your team. They're just great people. And one of the things I just keep coming back to when we're doing our recruiting and interviewing and hiring and all those kinds of things, if you want a great salesperson, you do have to start with a great person. And those of us who were athletes and all of those things growing up, we knew there were people in our leagues who were fantastically talented players, but they weren't team players. They didn't, you can either personal stats or team stats. And certainly meeting your team, there's a competitive element for sure, but great teammates.
Yeah. And so one of the things I forgot to mention is one of the things that we did, the final round interview was in person, was virtual. But once they got to me, it was a final round interview. I knew what the scorecard was, but what was another question I asked myself, Mark?
Yeah.
Would I want to, go next door and have a beer with this person?
Great question.
Are they somebody that I genuinely want to invest in? They seem like a good person. And, I call it the vibe check, internally. But, that absolutely played a pivotal role in, selecting that in person. We talk about 90% of communication is nonverbal. Right? Right now we're looking at each other by a 2x2 screen, but you don't know what I'm doing with my hands right now, but I could tell you a lot what's going on. And I talk with my hands a lot, by the way. So I think that was also a big source of success, those two factors and the human kind of element to hiring.
Yeah, fantastic thoughts. That's been there for a while, this idea, hey, would I want to go and spend some time with this person? Because that's going to come across too. Are they interested and interesting?
Mhm.
Because certainly, in professional sales, that's one of the things we have to think about, being really interested, the curiosity and interesting. Just on the curiosity front, team, I love that was the first of the 4 C's. The smartest people in the world are highly curious, right? Intellectually curious. But there's someone who's zoned in on this whole theme in terms of the connection between curiosity and actual success. And her name's Diane Hamilton. And she's been on the show a couple of times and written 2 great books, but she also ran a syndicated radio show where literally she interviewed the most successful people in the world, every big name you can think of, presidents, top executives at every company, they all were on the show. And to a person, that's where this curiosity came from. There was this constant theme when she was having these interviews that they were all just so intellectually curious. And then she talked about how you can cultivate it. And then also talked about in some organizations, if barriers exist, what do you do to get through it? So you can continue to sort of encourage that curiosity. So then Camila, as we're ramping up, you're building this team, then you've got this task that again, for many leaders today would seem overwhelming. How do I actually onboard these people so that within a reasonable period of time, they've got a shot at making a contribution, or within a reasonable period of time, unfortunately, we may also find out that sales isn't for them. No recruiting process is perfect. But can you speak to, from your perspective, some of the thoughts and considerations about building that onboarding plan? Because you would have been recalibrating it, right? You would have been starting that again.
Correct. So, we had an existing onboarding for sales reps, right? It's like 4 or 5 weeks.
Account executives.
We have an enablement team and, we wanted to, how do we condense it to make sure that it's right size for the BDRs? So again, I speak on collaboration quite a bit because it's very important in a bigger organizations just to make sure that we are aligned with the other areas of the business that have already put in a ton of work into these before, so we don't have to start from scratch. With that being said, I said, hey, I want to be part of this first onboarding class. Like, I'm going to sit in onboarding with them. I want to experience what it's like. I want to hear how the training is being delivered. I want to see the engagement from the BDRs and be there as a resource. Because another reason for this is the organization in 2020, we went fully remote.
Right.
And the BDR team was the first team that was going to be back in office 4 times a week.
Wow.
And so, I made sure I sat in with them. I took notes. I sent it to the enablement team afterwards. And to me, there's a difference between training and certification.
There is.
There's, you can do all the training and you can do all the best training. But if there's no reinforcement, if there's no recalling, if there's no type of certification, if I ask that BDR about the training a month later, the forgetting curve is going to do the work for us and they won't be able to recall anything. So, from that end, I really ensured I wanted to submerge myself in the existing kind of condensed onboarding. And every single time we had a feedback loop, right? What did we like? What did we not like? Where can we condense areas? How can we make it more practical? And we've had multiple hiring classes since. Every single time I'm always asking, hey, where did you get most value? What could be changed? What can we do? And we make, small adjustments, from training class to training class.
Well, look at the 4 C's that you have. So this is this idea, whereas we leaders, are we walking the walk or just talking the talk? But you're coachable. You're saying, hey, we've got this onboarding plan. We want to hear from you, those going through it. While it's still fresh, we want to hear what's working and what isn't working and how we just continually improve for the next group. Even if we get 5% better, it just starts to compound over time.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing that's just amazing to me, and it's a real, we'll call it a canary in a coal mine for me, of a healthy organization. When we come in and do training, I just ran from some training to this podcast recording. We were doing training this morning and we just jumped onto this podcast. One of the things that's really a great sign for me is if we're training a group of BDRs, for example, if the account executives or the BDR leader is in the training, living it and actively participating. And so this idea when you said, hey, I want to go through this, I want to be in the program with them, I think it's a critical success component because we need to continue to reinforce some of the core concepts, because one-time training really doesn't work really. You've got the forgetting curve, our old pal Herman Ebbinghaus. Forgetting curve is alive and well unless you do something to block it. And one of the things is having the leader go through the training so they can start to reinforce some of these core concepts so that they resonate. So I just think that's, a dynamite idea. Was there anything when you went through the training, things that you thought really resonated with the team, whether it be role plays, whether it be homework assignments or presentations and so forth? What were some of the things that kept the team engaged, but were also really effective?
Two things that come to mind. One, absolutely role plays. Like, you got to put it into action. You got to get the feedback. You got to get stuck. You got to get nervous. You got to get those butterflies going when you're next up in the round robin. Like, that's how we learn, right? Like, we got to be outside of our comfort zone. Those butterflies, that nervousness means that you're stepping outside of your comfort zone. You are learning a new skill. So, the role plays absolutely were one of them. The second one that we've done now over the last 5 to 6 onboarding classes that has gotten a lot of great feedback is a mindset session on the very last day of onboarding.
Tell us about that.
And the structure here is talking about getting everybody's definition. It's a workshop. And it's, hey, like, what's everybody's definition of mindset and why is it important in sales? Right. And, hey, sales is a roller coaster, a lot of perseverance, X, Y, Z. And I talk about, okay, cool. Yes. Like, I talk about this stat, like the average performing BDR, if they get 10 pickups, they'll convert 1.5, 15% of them. The top performer will convert 25%. If I say that in another way, Mark, the average performer is hearing no 85% of the time, and the top performer is hearing no 75% of the time. I don't know about you. I don't really like hearing no. Right? And no can be connected with rejection. Yes. If you're hearing rejection 85% of the time, like, what type of impact can that have on your mindset?
Yes.
And we talk about, hey, that can bring doubt, anxiety, fear. I'm not good enough. That internal talk that then starts to impact behaviors. Hey, I'm not good enough. I'm going to get a no. Therefore, I'm actually, like, this phone is now weighing 100 pounds. And my confidence going into the phone is a little shaky. Therefore, now I'm making less calls. I'm doing less conversions, and I'm actually feeding into the mindset of I'm not good enough, and it becomes a vicious cycle.
Yes.
And being able to talk about that proactively and tell them, hey, like, rejection is it's a fact. It is coming. It's going to happen. And by the way, all of these things that we're talking about, like, they're going to happen. And it's, how do we, I'm a firm believer that you can take control of that narrative.
Yes.
Right. This, rejection, this rejection is just one step closer to a win. Right. Or, being able to acknowledge that, hey, I'm in this state. I asked them, what are ways that we can get out of that state? And then they come up with answers. Hey, some of them meditate, some of them go out for a walk, some of them use humor, some of them like video games. Like, everybody has their own mechanisms to get out of this.
Yeah.
And I believe talking about this early on, because I also emphasize, you guys all just fell into sales. You don't know if this is what you want. You're trying this out, and you're about to hear no for the first 3 months. And, you've been a top performer in school, or you've, great varsity athlete. Now you're just going to get beaten down because the sales development role is the hardest role in sales, right?
Yes.
You're actively choosing to call people that are not expecting your call. This is all outbound, by the way.
Yes.
So, being able to talk and have a very real conversation about the mental battle that's going to happen, and really creating an environment where they do not have to withhold. Because as humans, we like to look good or we want to avoid looking bad. And when you're hearing no, guess what you want to do? You don't want to tell anybody. You want to keep that to yourself, and that is no bueno. Like, hey, this no is actually, there's coaching that can be done. We can role play that objection again, so you're better prepared for next time. And that concept of just not withholding, like speak up when, you get a rejection, speak up when you're not feeling well, lean in on your teammates. Also, I think has had a major impact on the BDRs also becoming friends within the organization and coming up together. And so, and it's one of my favorite sessions as well to run, because it just really goes into the mindset really piece, and how much, I think that is one of the most important things that any person can invest into, as it drives behaviors and it drives everything else, like quality of life.
Bravo. So team, you can't tell on the podcast, but I'm just jotting down notes, furiously. And it's funny, Camilo, we've never talked about this at this level of detail, you and I, even though we know each other. So we as part of our training have a mindset component. We don't get into absorbing and dealing with the rejection. We kind of skirt over it, frankly, a bit, and talk about it's not personal and, how do you recharge? But this idea of don't withhold. And by the way, it's okay. This is what we're going to experience. And frankly, that other piece that says, I love this idea of just being transparent, saying, hey, folks, none of you in this room, walked off the ice when you were playing hockey in grade 7 and said, my lifelong dream is not to be a hockey goalie. It's actually to be in professional sales. That's not what happened. You wanted to be a goalie. You wanted to be an out player, probably a goalie. Being a goalie, I think everybody loves that more. But so it's okay for us to have this conversation. And I think even knowing that puts a little more wind in my sails, because it feels like the organization embraces the fact, hey, this is a tough thing to do. We have to be cognizant of it. And by the way, it doesn't mean it's impossible. And I think as human beings, we're hardwired to avoid rejection. We're hardwired to avoid vulnerability because it's scary. But like anything in life, once you start throwing yourself out there and jumping outside the comfort zone, your comfort zone increases and you try, harder things and harder things and harder things. And the underlying theme, I think, for a lot of the younger folks out there and the BDRs and SDRs is the imposter syndrome is alive and well. So regardless of our bravado, even for me at this point in time in my career, much older than probably anybody listening to this, but every once in a while, after a couple of rough goes in a row, I might hit a trough and go, man, do we really know what we're doing here? What's going on? What am I doing wrong? So this idea that there's a little bit of imposter syndrome in everybody, and that's okay. It doesn't stop us from doing what we need to do. But having that team, the collaboration, the other thing I love, back to the office. This is so much easier if I've got a team of 9 or 10 other people working down a line doing the same thing. The power of the peloton or the power of the group is an absolutely real thing. And I've seen the energy of your cool offices in Toronto. They used to be a musical concert hall. I've seen the energy of being there. It just puts, wind in your sails to walk into a place where the energy is already cooking.
If I can add something here,
Please.
When I was taking my 6-month break and I was looking to come back, I had 5 bullet points of what I was looking for. And one of them was remote work. And that's hard to believe now.
Yeah.
And boy, I'm glad that I decided to scratch that off, because I cannot emphasize, especially for somebody that's new to sales, I think within their first 3 to 4 years, I think once you're established, you know what you're doing, by all means, you want to have that balance and see your kids and, I get all of that. But new in sales, like we just joke about it with my boss right now, but it's, some of these new sales reps that we were hiring, like they're hearing no 75-85% of the time. And then they're surrounded by four walls. There's nobody to talk about it with. You want to avoid looking bad, so you're not going to share it with anybody. And where's the development? And, the in-office culture, to your point, you learn through osmosis, right? Hey, there's, Ethar is on the other side and he's, objection handling. And then, they get the final no, and then you laugh it off, right? Hey, like, listen to my rejection here. And it's also allowed us, one of the successes of and how we were able to scale fast is the concept of creating teams and teamwork.
Yes.
And so not everything has to go through me or through my managers. It's how does the first generation of BDRs that were hired transfer knowledge to the second generation of BDRs, and creating a mentorship system and specific blocks where they're shadowing each other, they're working together, they're collaborating, and it's very different in person. Even the ability, hey, let's go next door for a beer or a drink of your choice if you don't drink, right? Like that really goes a very long way, I think, in terms of retention, in terms of engagement, and in terms of mindset. Like mindset, having people to pick you up when you're not feeling good, people that care about you, I think goes a very long way, especially when you're dealing with the no after no after no after no.
How can any of this be wrong? This idea of the teamwork and the support. One of the things I always find that's amazing is if you've got a teammate who's having a bit of a tough time and you take a few minutes to sit down with them, have a chat, listen to them, really listen to them, give a little coaching and put a little wind in the sails, you actually feel better. So forget them. But by giving a little bit of that positivity in the universe and lifting somebody else up, you feel better. And then sometimes as well, by the way, as you're reinforcing some of these things, you're saying things out loud like, nothing's changed in terms of your ability. You've just had 5 or 6 tough calls. But last week when you booked 3 appointments, nothing's changed. Nobody stole your talent. You're actually telling yourself that. So these things, I think it's really a positive, it's a virtuous cycle up. If we've got a team and people contribute, and when they lend a hand to somebody new coming on board, that individual, once they've onboarded, they'll remember it, and they know the culture is to lend a hand to the next person coming in.
Correct.
So it's this
forward.
Really virtuous circle of everything moving up in a positive way. One of the things that we get a look at sometimes with the clients who engage us, and maybe we try and help and support on, is a reasonable ramp up period of time. I think sometimes for organizations today, some of the pressure felt by, the SDR, BDR team, particularly for outbound, is they just don't get enough of a ramp up period of time. And so in addition to everything we've talked about today making it so difficult, they also feel this cadence where, hey, by month 2, if I'm not hitting my numbers, I'm going to be out, and all these other things. What are your thoughts? I know you're very well read on all these things. What are your thoughts in terms of a reasonable ramp up period for somebody who's doing this today?
Yeah, great question. It's interesting you mentioned the Bridge Group before.
Yes.
Right. They do benchmarking on this particular topic. And, what they found and what I found is 3 months.
3 months.
Right. First month is, a 3 to 4 week onboarding. We want them completely immersed in that. The second month, we're just ensuring that we're coaching on the behaviors that will drive the result. Are you adding X amount of contacts into a sequence? Are you completing your sequences by the end of the day? Are you curious? Are you controlling the controllables is another line that my BDRs make fun of me for, because I'm all about behaviors, right? Results that are backward looking. I want to make sure that you're exhibiting, the right behavior. So that second month is, hey, behaviors. They have a 0 meeting expectation in month 1. They have they're 50% to their ramp in month 2.
And then come month 3 is when now they're going to be at 100% of their, let's say, of their meetings quota.
Yes.
And we provide all the structures, the infrastructure, the role plays, the one-on-ones, the playbooks. Hey, you're struggling with connect rate? Here's a playbook. You're struggling with phone conversion rate? Here's a playbook. You're struggling with show rate? Here's a playbook that outlines all the behaviors that drive to that result. And this is something new that we've started documenting over the past 2-3 months after taking Kevin Dorsey's sales acceleration course. And that's, a manager is coaching a BDR on show rate. I have 5 managers now. They could all, let's say there's 15 different things that you can do for show rate. And they may bring up 2 or 3. And the other manager brings up 5. And then the other one brings up something else. And why? Because all of this information is living in here and it hasn't actually been documented somewhere with here's just step by step. So one of the things that we've been doing is, hey, let's
write it down.
Let's write it down. Let's study what great looks like. Let's write it down. If a BDR is doing it, let's have them write it down, and essentially creating this compilation of playbooks written by the BDRs for the BDRs, because guess who the BDRs want to learn from? Not this guy. I already talk enough.
I'll debate you on that one, but they do get more. Yeah, I'm sure they do want to learn from you, but they also want to get more from their teammates, who are doing this and being successful. And the idea is so smart. Write it down.
Write it down.
Do we ever have enough time for this? Nope. Is it something where we capture best practices and experience? And really, this is the value of having a larger organization. We have so much insight because we're making so many calls, having so many meetings, closing so many deals. All these things are super important to us. So taking that time to document these things, just critically important. Let me ask you this. By the way, we could talk for hours. We'll come back at some point in time, Camilo. We'll come back and we're going to talk about leadership and management.
Mm-hmm.
But right now we're just on this critically important topic of BDRs and SDRs, because the truth of it is, any organization, any leader out there today, the number one thing people want in sales, they want more opportunities. They want more quality conversations with the right buyer, and they want more opportunities. Most organizations think they're pretty good at taking an opportunity and converting it into a deal. But when you start to look at the metrics, they're always coming back and saying, we can't get attention and interest. We can't get a meeting. There's a lot of good logical reasons they can't, given what takes place today. But this is that function that's so super important. 2 other questions I think would be super helpful. So you referenced about 5 books over the course of, this podcast. You talked about your own taking a break, that you've got this self-awareness and this, emotional intelligence. So let's talk first, sources of information for you. So how do you stay current in professional sales? What do you do to continue to learn? What are the things you like doing to continue to learn?
Absolutely. So the first thing that comes to mind is a company called Pavilion, and their CEO is Sam Jacobs, who I believe has been on this.
He has,
as well.
6 or 7 episodes ago. He's a great guy.
Exactly, and what he's built is a community of sales leaders, sales managers, and allowed them the opportunity to share best practices, ask questions. And within that community or, membership subscription, there's also a lot of courses.
Yes.
So, there's CRO school, there's revenue architecture, there's go-to-market strategy, there's bridging the gap from BDR to AE, which I'm taking right now. Right. And, to me, how I love to learn in many different ways, love reading. I can take, online courses, but I think where the magic is when this happens. Yeah. When you can talk about it, when you can bring it into your day to day, when I can introduce it to my managers and begin brainstorming as to how we actually operationalize this within our organizations, and it not just be theory that I talk about.
So, from that perspective, I think it's extremely important to continue to flex that curiosity muscle. Pavilion is absolutely a resource that I work there. LinkedIn, I follow some great, amazing people that are posting fantastic content. There's mentors and there's people that I reached out to that I have, weeklies and monthlies with, where I'm continuously asking questions, just asking questions. My CRO, my current boss, people that I've known in the past, you've come and done some work with the BDR. Say, Mark, can I pick your brain a little bit?
Loved it. Yeah.
Always flexing that curiosity muscle. And when I do, guess what I'm doing after?
Capturing it.
I'm making notes. I'm making notes. And, am I writing an essay, 2-page essay after a conversation? No, but I'm going to write down my key takeaways so that I can come back to it after and over again in the future.
Fantastic. And last question as we wrap up here, what are you most excited about in terms of this business discipline of professional sales? Like every time I chat with you, whether we were training your teams or we were having one-on-ones, I kind of leave, more energized when I'm chatting with you about this business discipline because of your, inherent intellectual curiosity and positivity toward what we do. What are you most excited about, in the future of B2B sales?
What a question, Mark. I'll share it like this. When I was thinking about coming back and my boss said, hey, we're building out this BDR function, I was like, do I want to, I want to be where the revenue is at. I want to be closing. I want to be where the money is at. Again, narrative. With that said, when I thought about it more in detail, and we've talked about this in the past, it's, hey, this first year in sales or second year, you're trying something out for the first time. You don't know if you're going to like it or not. And the difference between going into an organization that has, a great product market fit, great training, great culture, great vibe versus one that doesn't, because we've already established that the barrier to entry in sales is quite
nothing.
Is there's no certification, no anything.
Yeah.
The difference between joining A or B could be the difference between somebody saying, hey, I want to dedicate my career to this, or I never want to make a cold call ever again, and let me take a look at something else, which, by the way, is completely fine. It's completely fine if that's what you learn throughout the process.
Yes.
And so, what really intrigues me personally is how the perception of sales is evolving. And, we've talked about in 80s, 90s, there's, you mentioned to somebody, hey, I'm going to start in sales, and there's this car salesperson, there's this Wolf of Wall Street, that's madman, what's been shown in through Hollywood. But it's very different now. It's a consultative type sale. You have to be curious, you have to have executive presence, you have to work on your craft just like you would if you had, if you were a doctor, or if you were a lawyer. You have to put in the work, you have to, outwork and be curious and practice it. And so that's, going into now year 2, now we're that first iteration of BDRs are now being promoted to AEs, and here's some gaps that we identified, and how can we actually mitigate that for the future so that when they do come in, they're ready to rock and roll, or at least that ramp isn't as big. So it's, I think it's that evolvement of how sales is perceived and career that it can be, and how fulfilling, and the impact that you're making on others. That's something that excites me. That's something that is, a big part of my why now, is helping others find their muse and find, what they're fulfilled, what brings them fulfillment. So, and I think we're going to see that a little bit more over the next few years.
I completely agree with you. Well, we'll have another conversation on that. I think there's a day coming where we actually have a formal certification for B2B sales. But in the meantime, by the way, as we wrap up, first of all, I just want to say thank you so much for joining today, Camilo. What a great conversation. It's been such a pleasure having you on the show.
Absolutely, Mark. Thank you so much for having me. I loved and always love conversations with you.
Oh, right back at you. Tell us a little bit about Infotech, just so we understand what Infotech does. And then also, if somebody listening to this today wanted to connect with you, what's the best way to learn a little more, connect?
Absolutely. So, Infotech, we are an IT research and advisory firm. So we are working with IT professionals. We're right in the middle of the tech ecosystem. And what we do is we're providing these IT leaders with actionable insights, advice to help them execute on their key priorities. In other words, we help IT leaders get done. And, how can people connect with me? LinkedIn, Camilo Silva, you can absolutely send me a request, and we can definitely go from there.
Awesome. Thanks, Camilo. And team, thank you very much for joining today. So as always with the Selling Well podcast, we're trying to elevate the performance and professionalism of B2B sales, because our belief, if we help you do that, we're actually improving the lives of professional salespeople. But we're also growth oriented, and I know I'm not perfect at this. So if you enjoyed today's episode, please like and subscribe to the Selling Well podcast, because that really does matter to us. That's how we get great guests like Camilo. But if there's a couple of things that we can be doing to make this even more effective for you, we love constructive criticism. So you can send your suggestions to me, Mark Cox at inthefunnel.com. That's my personal email, markcox@inthefunnel.com. And I personally respond to every bit of constructive criticism that we receive. We really appreciate it. Team, thank you so much for joining us today on the Selling Well podcast. We'll see you next time.